Hi students, today's topic is the 11th standard NCERT, the living world. The living world. In this lesson, we are going to learn about living organisms, how they are interact with their environment, and moreover, how to differentiate the living organisms from the non-living organisms. For that, entities in around what the entities are there means nothing but things. Entities means things around us. Different things are there. These things called as entities. These are categorized into two things. Around us, the entity are the things which are the two kinds, which are the inanimates and animates. Inanimates and animates. Here, inanimates nothing but abiotic components. Abiotic components are non-living things. Non-living things. Got it? In inanimates over here animates, which are the biotic components. Biotic components. Biotic components. These biotic components also called as living organisms. Living organisms. What do you call? Living organisms are we called as the living organisms. Inanimates, animates. Here biotic components and living organisms. So here now these any organisms where it is living that should be interact with the inanimates, which are the non-living organisms or non-living things. So here that animates any animal which lives in the, for example, if you take aquatic environment, in that the fish, it should be interact with the surrounding environment, which is the water and salinity and the oxygen. These are all the non-living components, right? Now here, how to differentiate these non-living things and living things? For that, the living organisms should possess some characters which does not have or does not contain the non-living things. So here you know that every molecule which is made up of atom, the group of atoms as a molecules they aggregate as a particular crystals and colloids and cell to tissue and tissue made as a organ system like that. Whereas the non-living things, they stopped in the crystalline forms only. They are not together as a colloidals. But whereas the non-living organisms, they should be continue up to cell to finally is the organism. So here living organisms they can shows the some fundamental characters. In that first character, which is the growth. Growth is the first fundamental character which can differentiate the living organisms from the non-living organisms. Next one, reproduction. Reproduction. Third one, metabolism. Fourth one, which is the consciousness. These are the four characters we try to differentiate living organisms from the non-living organisms. See here, first go for the growth. Growth means growth which can brings the organism in the that mass, increase of mass or the length, whatever it is, by the cell division, through the what? Cell division. Cell division and differentiation, it brings the change in the organism, where it is the either mass or the length, whatever it is. So here in the cell we can see two types of components are there. Protoplasmic components. First one, protoplasmic component. Second one is the apoplasmic component. Apoplasmic component. These protoplasmic components means cells, okay, which are present in the cell, which are the blood cells and all the things. The derivatives of these cells, which are the fibers and connective tissue, these are all together in the apoplasmic components. Anyhow, the cell will be grow or the mass will be increased by inside growth. That should be happens in the living cells. That growth known as the intrinsic growth. Intrinsic growth. The growth should be happens which from the inside of cell to increase the cytoplasm. Then it be divided into two cells, right? That growth known as the intrinsic growth. Whereas the non-living things also can grow. You might have heard about growth of mountains and boulders, right? These are become bigger. That growth is not from the inside, it's the outside. There are some material which is added on the particular substrate or the rock. That type of growth we can call it as the extrinsic growth. Extrinsic growth we can notice in non-living organisms, whereas the intrinsic growth is we notice in the living organisms. So here growth we can find in the both living and non-living also. We can't say only living things can grow, means that's wrong, because of non-living things also can show the growth. What is an example? Mountains and boulders, okay, big boulders, they can show the growth. That growth known as the extrinsic growth. That's the reason growth is not a fundamental property of living organisms. It has some exceptions, right? It fails to explain or differentiate living organisms from the non-living organisms. When I will go reproduction, next second one is reproduction. Reproduction means the organisms can produce same kind of individuals which are similar to the parents. Simply called as to recover the loss of individuals by the diseases they may die or the due to natural death or some other cases. What the organisms are lost, that will be fulfilled by the mode of reproduction. Second property is the reproduction. Reproduction, simply perpetuation of the race. Okay, the organism can produce same kind of individuals by the process of reproduction. So this reproduction can we say is the fundamental property of the living organism without any exceptions. For that, we have to try to do that. See here, amoeba, binary fission, and paramecium, and hydra by the process of budding, and yeast also by the process of budding, they can divide and produce the young ones. Whereas the plants also they can reproduce vegetatively and sexually. In the higher animals also they can produce their young ones in the sexual mode of reproduction. So here, if you say all organisms, living organisms can reproduce, it means the statement is wrong, because of mule is a hybrid, it can't produce, and sterile human can't produce, and sterile worker bees also. In the honey hive, worker bees also cannot produce. Then all living organisms should reproduce means the statement is wrong, with exceptions only. All living organisms can reproduce, exception in the mule and sterile human couple and worker bee in the honey hive. So these should not be reproduced. Correct? Non-living things also cannot reproduce. But if you give the answer statement, all living organisms can reproduce means with exception. With exception. You know that mule, how the mule obtained means the cross between the male donkey and female horse. When we cross made between male donkey and female horse, we obtain the mule. This is the sterile, this is a hybrid sterile one. Okay, it can't reproduce again. And here in the next reciprocal cross, in the next time we can change the female donkey cross with the male horse. The resulting one is the henny. So in such cases, and sterile humans also in the society, some couples they are not producing their young ones, they are sterile, they don't bear any babies. So here that reason that reproduction is not a you can't distinguish by living organisms from the non-living organisms without any exceptions. So this is not a fundamental property, with some exceptions only will be fundamental property. Next one, metabolism. Third one, you can go for the third one. Metabolism means sum total of all biological reactions called as the metabolism. All sum total of biological reactions called as metabolism. In our body, number of metabolisms takes place every day, day to day life activity. Here is the respiration and circulation and like these excretions, all are the biological process. So in that, some metabolic process require energy, some other metabolic process are the to give the energy yielding process and energy consuming process. For example, photosynthesis is there in the plants. Photosynthesis in plants, the plants can prepare their own food by aggregation of the all materials. Here is the photosynthesis is the anabolic process, whereas respiration is the catabolic process. But anyhow, these reactions, when we only living cell only can shows the metabolism, only living in the living cell only metabolism takes place. That's the reason metabolism is the fundamental property of living organisms without any exception. If you pose a question in the laboratory, in the test tube, we are conducting some reactions. So that reactions are the living reactions, but should not happen in the living cell, right? That's the reason metabolism is the fundamental property of living organisms without any exception, right? Test tube, when you are conducting laboratory, that is the living reaction, but should not be the living cell. So only living cell, inside the cell only, this all will be happens. That's the reason this is the fundamental property. Next one, consciousness. Conscious means what, aware. We should aware of our environment, our surrounding. Okay, you are giving the responses due to the particular stimuli. Got it? So here all the organisms, living organisms can respond. Got it? If you give a stimuli, according to stimuli we can respond. That property can you see in the non-living things? Of course, non-living things cannot be respond. Even though some robots and Alexa devices and iPhone Siri, if you give a command, Siri call to Deepak, it means that will be call will be going on, that is response only na. But these electronic devices, they are not made up of the cells. Am I right? Not a living cell reaction. And moreover, in the consciousness, human being only individual to know about himself, self-awareness, but remaining animal should not have. And moreover, here when we give the stimuli, according to stimuli we are responding. That cold, temperature, pressure, right, and cool breeze when it touches our skin, our responses are same, different. Got it? Light also play a major role to create the different to stimulate the responses. Now here the thing is, the person who is coma patient, okay, in the coma patient we can't say either living nor dead. Got it? Because of biologically and physically he was dead, but biologically the process is going on. Due to the pipes, we are providing the food material and all the things. By machinery, by equipments, he is alive, but physically he can't give any response to us. When you call the coma patient, he can't respond. Okay, if you give any command, he can't respond because of biologically inside that all functions going on, but heart and lungs, which are what you call they work depends on the machineries. That's the reason these consciousness, the patient who is in coma, we can't consider as a neither living nor dead. So here that metabolism only that fundamental feature of living organism without any exceptions. Here is the exceptions that non-living things can grow, that is the what extrinsic growth. Here is the sterile organisms, they cannot reproduce. That's the reason all living organisms are produced, means the statement will be wrong, right? Metabolism, for that no exceptions at all. Okay, if you say that we are same kind of reactions we are takes place in the laboratory, it means of course, but here is within the test tube you are doing, but in our cell how glucose is oxidized, right, how electrons are transported, these are the living system. In our cell is the living system, whereas the outside of the there is a living reactions you can made, but not in the cell. In the consciousness also, that every organism can respond, which are the living, touch me not is a good example in the plants. Tendrils of the some creepers, they can respond, right? And towards the light, the sunflower plant or any plant towards the light only they can grow. Got it? That's the phototoxic movements, phototropisms. Plants, animals, they can source the based on the light, they can change their food pattern, all the things. That is the response. We give the proper stimuli, they can respond. So here, among these four, the living organism, which is the fundamental feature without any exception, means should write metabolism. That is the best method for the metabolic reaction should be happens in the human being. I hope you understood. Thank you.